my name is Carissa. I am essentially running this panel. I apologize if I sound a little tired. I am, but please bear with me. Yeah. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of just keep this in a great discussion type, and hopefully it should work out pretty good. I wanted to, before we got into any type of Q&As or specific plots that you guys are working on right now that you would want group input on and anything like that, I kind of wanted to essentially go over basic plots and structures, just the standard format that you want for any type of story, whether you're doing a short story, anything like that, pretty much anything above a drabble, the overall arc that you would want to use. And then along with a couple of literary devices that you can use, plot devices, things like that, to help build tension as the story goes. And then we can jump into specific plot questions you guys have and things like that. So the way that you kind of describe the overall plot that you would want in any story, whether it's fan fiction or a real story, technical term that they use for it is actually called Freytag's pyramid, but that's kind of annoying, and all you need to know is that it is essentially a pyramid shape. You have essentially a kind of a dull start to most aspects, where what this is called the exposition, which is basically just you're explaining the story as well as you can. You're setting up world, you are setting up aspect, everything like that. You don't want to do, now for exposition, the trick to this is you do not want to dump. So the way they generally put it is if you have to put in a prologue to explain your story, you are not writing it correctly. Because the majority of publishing companies out there, if they see that you have a prologue and it is just explaining your world, they won't even read through your draft. And the way I know this is because, believe me, I've sent in my stuff, I've gotten my rejection letters, and I know why. And that holds true for fan fiction. If the first thing that your readers see is a plot dump explaining why your world is different than canon, they're not going to be very interested in. They're going to want to see characters first. They're going to want to see world building that is not just, here, you need to know this to understand my fic. Because they want to understand your fic as they're going along. So basic rules for exposition is start in on a scene that will give you an overall sense of your character. So if you are writing, pretty much here everybody knows Naruto, right? Okay, so if you are starting out on a Naruto fic, you wouldn't want to just jump in there and say, like, in the city of Konoha, which is a ninja village which contains a bunch of people who run around and throw sharp, pointy objects at each other for money. You don't want to do that. You want to do something like, expansive with imagery, going over a large field of trees with, occasional spots of silver glinting in the light, because, ninjas will have weapons and stuff like that, or muted glints here and there. You come across, a high wall, you go into it, and you wake up in the room of whatever your main character is. Or you go into a room where they're at, or you come across a conversation, things like that, that set up the scene, and that where the actions and the dialogue of the characters actually explain what is going on. So instead of just saying, a couple of people were getting ready for a mission, you go, so do you have all of your equipment for this mission? Or do you have all of your equipment? Do we have the papers we need to get through to this country? You explain it with actions and dialogue rather than just statements. Because if you do statements, it's boring and you lose a lot of what you can do. And like world building is, and they walked past a bunch of academy students who were currently practicing their wall climbing. things like that. You don't necessarily just say everything, you don't dump everything. You slowly build over the point of your exposition so people understand the world that you are trying to build with it. The next part is basically kind of where you begin to get your rising action. And I can't remember the technical term, so I'm not even going to try. No, there's actually a long kind of word for it that I could probably look up, but I'm just going to call it rising action because it's easier. Yeah.
Because I want to question about world building, because this has got more of an original deal, an idea I have. Well, essentially, it's this I mean, I'm not sure how to go about it, but like, you know, say here's this gigantic, you know, gas giant. There's 2 moons that have life. One developed space flight, and they discovered life on this world, and I'm not sure how to exactly, you know, go about explaining this world right before the story actually takes place.
Okay. Yeah, you don't want to explain it right before the story takes place, because that's kind of just like tacking it into a prologue. Essentially, what you would want to do is probably come at it from more of a character aspect. So, like I said, have like maybe your main character going about their daily business, and as they're going about that business, you know, just like say, you know, glanced out of a viewport to see the expanse of, you know, the moon's primary gas giant that it was orbiting around, and you could just see a hint of the other moon on the other side, and kind of go out about it like that.
Or what about having like reading from a history book? Would that later on work out, or how's that?
I wouldn't necessarily do it unless you can somehow tie the history book into the character's development, like if they're a history buff, things like that. And even then, you wouldn't want to put text verbatim into, like, text from the history book verbatim into your book, because that would drive people insane. Unless they're like me and they're history buffs anyway. But the majority of people don't want that long, drawn-out explanation. They want kind of fast action story that's easy to follow, and things that they don't have to memorize an entire worldview for until they get into the fandom.
Okay.
And that sticks for fan fiction as well. It's the more that you can build it in subtly so that they can see the world as opposed to having it dumped on them, the better it's going to be.
And that's more of my fan fiction. What about like how about one character, you know, with comments from the other characters, or just maybe explaining this is the world I'm from, and just.
I wouldn't do a dump like that. I would do like maybe if the worlds are, and this can work for like Star Trek Fic too, anything that you write where there's like, or maybe where countries are completely separate, like in Avatar, things like that, where it's like, you know, oh, I'm from, you know, just like, oh, you know, hi, my name's blank, I'm from, you know, here, any chance you can give me a hand? Okay, sure, I can walk you over there. Isn't that the place, and hey, where are you from? Isn't that the place where they do that? Oh yeah, and you know, just like do a toss away comment with like an overall stereotype, and that would give people an idea without having to go into too much detail.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What about like the generic magical girl setups where the main character narrates, this is who I am, this is where I'm from, this is the place that, and they put out the entire setting in the beginning?
Well, that's okay, and if you're going to do that in fic though, you want to make it so that it's clear cut. So, and you still want to include kind of action in there, so like maybe do that part in italics, like, you know, my name is, I'm going to do, since you mentioned Magical Girl, and I do still enjoy the series, Sailor Moon. So, like, yeah, yay. So, like, you know, my name is Yusagi, and I am a normal, average teenage girl. And then you have her, and then you explain her getting ready for school, everything like that. And then on her way to school, as she is running in normal haphazard style, all of a sudden she hears a scream. And so you have her like running, and then all of a sudden there was a scream. And then you add in another piece of exposition in italics, which is, except for one little thing. And then you do her transformation sequence, and I'm also Sailor Moon. And then she goes jotting off to save it, and then that kind of gives you your narrative world building without making it to just here's a dump. Is kind of break it up a little bit here by here and include pieces of story as you go along.
Sounds like the introduction of any character in any anime, really.
Yeah, except sometimes they don't always have the narrative, and sometimes the narrative in anime is needed because there's only so much you can show visually, because you can't all of a sudden put up, you know, how to spell their name. You can't put up their everything like that unless you're going to do like a text in shot, and they normally only do those for like military or corporate style animes. You don't get a lot of those from Magical Girl, things like that. So you can do it, and you can like put in introductions for people, but you want people to learn about your characters and your setting as you're going along. So you don't want to do a dump whenever a character is introduced. The worst thing that you can ever do for a canon character, a Mary Sue, anything you do, the worst thing you can do as you're going there is put, or even a setting like a building or anything like that, is go into like 3 paragraphs of introductory detail on what it is. That will lose you in a book, a fan fiction, anything you write. Because if all of a sudden you have a dump, it's like, you know, she was X high with blonde hair, you know, she liked this, this, and this. It's a character dump, and it's going to be annoying. And people aren't going to want to continue reading.
Well, what about like Clancy fodder? You know, like in St. Louis Trademark and Tom Clancy's, you know, like says, here's Cindy, she got her, and you know, got her new car for her birthday, and she was going for friends at the deal, and you know, that's 1 paragraph, and 2 paragraphs later, she gets killed in a car accident. You know, just
what it is they actually call that. I can't remember the literary term, but basically what it is, if you describe something in any amount of detail, it better play a part in the story later on. If in chapter 1 you mentioned that a character always has a red hat on or something like that, that red hat better play a part in later on stories.
Conservation of detail.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. But so that's kind of the way it is anyway. You can do a little bit of explanation, just like, you know, like say maybe, you know, and going back to Sailor Moon, you know, on her way running to school, she ran into Mina, whose blonde hair was just a shade lighter, and both of them looked quite a sight sprinting down there in their school uniforms. You know, something like that that will add in the details as you go along without getting too detailed, because nobody cares that the skirts are dark blue and that the bows are red or whatever. They just care, you know, what they're doing, where they're running, in a basic detail. So like if somebody says later on in the book, there's a blonde, you generally know about what character you're talking about. And any other questions on basic setup? Yeah?
Are introductions different for like drawing manga out? Because like you can do a lot more with the imagery, but just having like your character, like Sailor Moon run haphazardly through the streets sort of thing.
Yeah, you can
set up the world a lot better that way.
Yeah, you can set up the world a lot better that way. So to a certain degree, it is easier with anime and manga because you can show things in there that you wouldn't be able to in writing. So part of it is learning how to add the details along a little bit as you go for your writing to kind of make it seem like they're moving past things in the story instead of just here's a dump so that you understand what happens later. Sorry, one sec. Go ahead.
Have you ever read any Charles Dickens novels? Yeah, okay, that's the reason why you haven't, is because he describes too much. And I'm a literary major, so it's okay. I can say that.
Yeah, no.
Ever.
Whoa.
Blasphemy.
Christmas Carol's awesome, but it's like, oh, Tale of Two Cities? Oh.
What I heard was that back then authors were paid for the more words that they wrote, and the longer the books were.
Yeah, so, and then go ahead, I apologize.
Well, I guess that's again, almost to your point, because remember there was the prologue in front of started Blade Runner, but I guess there wasn't really much of a setup in Do Androids Dream of Little Sheep. I don't recall that in
Yeah, it depends really. The more experienced author you are, the less they're going to pre-screen your books. Like if you're already published, they aren't going to care if you do setup or, you know, this happened in the last book or whatever the heck you want to do. But if you're starting out, you're sending in your first manuscript and you're trying to get published, literally they read a prologue, they will toss your book. They will not finish it if they see a prologue, and all your prologue is world building. And so I would not recommend it for fan fiction either, because that is a fast way to lose readers. I have generally seen, just perusing myself, where if the summary interests me, I will read the first chapter no matter how bad that first chapter is. And that's another thing. If you're going to do fan fiction, basic part of plot is also grammar and standard things like that, so please include. But if all the first chapter is world building, explaining to me why this world is slightly different than canon, you lose me so freaking fast, because all I care about is a good story. I don't want to have to remember all of this 10 chapters down. I want the world to continually build so that it's entertaining as I go along, so I want to learn more instead of just dump, oh wait, I have to remember this 15 chapters in. No thank you. I'd rather have the details that I need when I need them.
So that's what I'm saying. So what if, like, this world building is a character kind of explaining 10 years went into the fic, or 10 chapters in the fic?
To a certain degree, as long as the revelations are prevalent at the moment, you can get away with that. Because there's always going to be the big reveal. There's always going to be the literary device or the dramatic device of, flashbacks, character history dumps, big reveals, things like that. But you don't want to do just like a huge, in the past 10 years, all of this 50 things have happening. Because seriously, the only massive backstory dump that has ever worked in the history of anime was Berserk. And that was because they did like 13 chapters of 13 volumes of backstory. I kid you not. And pretty much anybody else wouldn't have gotten away with that. But he already had like 2 successful series under his belt, things like that. So you don't want to just go into backstory and have it take up too much time. Like, I'm reading this one fic right now that lost me because they had to explain what happened 15,000 years ago, and they turned it into 3 chapters rather than a paragraph for me. And so they lost me the second chapter into that. And a friend of mine told me they stopped doing that. I still won't go back and read it because I'm terrified it's going to happen again. So you don't want to do too much of a dump.
Right.
And because I care about the characters I care about, not people who are basically there to explain like why a particular necklace is so important to the storyline. So any more questions on setup, anything like that? Okay, so like we mentioned, the next part of any type of plot line is where you get the rising action, which, I wish it was, I could remember the technical name, but I think both of us agree rising action works. So, rising action is generally when the story and the plot starts to pick up speed. You have a very short period for world building, which is why you have to do it carefully. And then you can still include world building as you're getting the rising action, because of course there's going to be new reveals about why things are important, things like that. But you do ultimately want to include mainly pieces of dramatic structure in your rising action, where you're doing, where you're including like plot devices, plot points, things like that, that slowly build the tension up for your readers. You know, toss in a couple of red herrings. They aren't just for murder mysteries, things like that. So how do you, just a question for the floor, how do you generally tell what particular plot point would invoke more tension so you know where to put it along your rising action bar? What are some of the methods people use to try to guess that?
I don't know. Cliffhangers. I don't know.
Cliffhangers are more for the end of stories or end of chapters. But, okay, so say somebody finds a body. That would be the start of it right here. So going along that, so right here somebody finds a body. Okay, so that is the first part where you start your rising action. Now, how do you begin building up the tension, and how do you start building up the overall feel for the story around that? Is that going to be your main plot? And if so, what are the things that you find out about how that body got there? And how do you tell where to put it in your rising action? What do you think would be more dramatic about finding that body, and what do you think would be less dramatic? And where do you decide to put it in?
probably like it's probably pretty much normal for them to like do the dusting for fingerprints thing right after they find the body.
Okay, so they start investigating right here. So the investigation starts. And your character would be brought in. Is your character going to be brought in, or are they the one who finds the body? Your plot's going to change on that. And what they eventually do with that investigation is definitely going to be one of the main or one of the top subplots that you have going, because that investigation is the thread that started everything, so you need it to continue. Otherwise you have a plot hole, and people hate plot holes. Yeah, let's not get into plot holes, aside from please don't include them. A plot hole is any thread that doesn't get explained. A plot hole is anything that you just don't explain properly, anything like that. A plot hole, we all know what plot holes are, right? We can all think of animes and movies that have them, where we just go, WTF, and you have no idea what happened. That is a plot.
What happened to so-and-so?
Yes, or they didn't explain that one. Or like for Avatar, what happened to Zuko's mom? Please, you can't just give us to us that in like the last episode. Okay.
Now, I'm talking about plot holes, but is a proper way of doing it? It's kind of just like a little snippet there, and just what's a flashback deal? We bring it.
You don't necessarily need a flashback to close a plot hole. You can just have like a one line of what happened to, what happened to so and so. Oh, they ended up moving to Albuquerque. Okay. That closes a plot hole.
But I mean,
shorter than a flashback.
The point is, explain it maybe later, just to
like explain it away later.
Yeah. I mean,
you can explain it away later, but you don't want to go into like an entire flashback unless it is exceedingly important to the story.
Oh, sure.
Like if you are just doing it because you are attached to that character and want to explain where they went, cut it. Because one of the worst things that will kill your rising action, one of the things that will kill your climax, is if you dump stuff in there that does not need to be in there. That will make your rising action kind of like dip down to there when it doesn't need to. Because very detailed writing, there are writers who have done it successfully, but it is a very rare balance. Like Tolkien, you get so much extra information in Tolkien that you don't need, but at the exact same time, he does it well enough that you're willing to put up with it to get to the good parts. So it's how you do it, how you design it, and you don't want to do it unless you have to. And so what other points, so after finding a body, what other points are going to help you along to the climax? Is it going to be finding a key witness? Is it going to be locating suspects?
The body disappears from the morgue.
The body disappears from the morgue. Okay, so you have all of these little events, and these are plot points. So you are going to have along your rising action a series of plot points. So here we find a suspect, maybe a person that somebody spotted in the general vicinity. And then you are going to say, okay, so we have a suspect, so we need evidence to help prove he's the one who did it, unless this is like a totalitarian society and they just point a finger and pick somebody. And if that's the case, you need to explain why that's wrong and why you included finding the body in the first place. And so essentially what it is you have these plot points. Now, does anybody know the difference between a plot point and a plot device?
Plot devices are what help move the plot along, like they, it's like something we use to get to the plot point almost.
Yes, exactly. Well, not exactly, but pretty close. So a plot point is something that happens along the plot line. So it is an actual event, an actual thing that occurs that moves the plot along. A plot device is something that is included purely to move the story along. So a plot device can push plot points and plot forward. Now, plot devices are generally things like maybe that witness. They're only in there for 2 minutes, and it's just like a you know, a coffee shop girl saying, oh yeah, I spotted him running past that way. That's a plot. That is a plot device. That is something you have only in there to help the main plot move forward. So that witness would be there is a plot device to help you catch the plot point, which is the suspect. Does that make sense? So different plot devices that you can use are, of course, throwaway characters, which still need to be developed a little bit. Other plot devices are things like, to a certain degree, flashbacks, things like that, anything that you're including just to get to a plot point. Now, plot points can be, you know, finding the suspect, and another plot point would be when they get the suspect to confess. That moves into a flashback. But you wouldn't want to have the suspect, unless you're trying to get the suspect out of the way fast. You know, the confession is going to be fairly up high near your climax, because it's like you're pushing them to confess. You're, you know, throwing a fit, things like that. You are pushing them as hard as you can. And so one of the things that you would want to do in between here in this first find suspect phase, saying you caught the right, like for instance, if you actually caught the right person in the first place, thank you. I don't know who helped me with that, but looking at somebody did, so thank you. So that would kind of give you additional subplots that you could do here along your rising action. Like maybe, you know, toss in there a red herring or two that leads you to, say, like another false suspect that could be it. And so in that instance, you have to spend a moment or two chasing after them. You know, things like that, things that help build the tension. Is this guy really the right one? How do we prove it? What are we doing? You could have a plot point in there where, like you said, the body disappears from the morgue and there goes a lot of your forensic evidence. How do you continue working the investigation like that? So you basically want to gauge the emotional and dramatic impact of each event that you want to include, and basically say, okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, finding the body is the 0. That's the main point of the rising action. Finding the suspect is maybe a 2 or a 3. Proving they're the guy is maybe a 8 or a 9. You know, things like that. Gauge about the impact you think that plot point is going to have on your story and include it in there. Now, the cool thing about this, though, is that with subplots and things like that, you can toss in things that don't really fit along your rising action, as long as your main storyline is plotted out and goes in a general upwards fashion. Like, say you want to toss in there, you know, in a major, like, say your main character gets a major personal upheaval, like right here. And so all of a sudden that subplot jumps up here, and they're trying to deal with this while still trying to make movement on this. And so you want to balance it out so that there's always something dramatic happening, but that thing that's always dramatically happening doesn't have to be with the main plot, as long as you are keeping interest in there and moving your primary plot forward. So,
crap.
Okay, so next main point to talk about is climax, which is basically the OS, oh my god, we're all going to die, heaven help us, please, the world is going to explode, the giant Death Star just came out of orbit around our world, you know, anything like that. That's going to be your climax, your WTF moment. Go ahead.
Or, I don't know, and this should be like that, because, I mean, this is, you know, one reason, I'll be totally honest, one movie I actually hate is Disney's The Little Mermaid, because there's totally trashes on the story. And
yeah, but
I guess
that's changing the story in the first place.
But I'm just saying, like, in the book, the climax is basically he gets engaged to another girl, and I guess it doesn't have to be so life-threatening.
Well, no, it doesn't have to be.
But it is pretty much about WTF
to her.
Yeah,
well,
still a
in
the original
WTF
story it was
often.
life-threatening to her, but yeah, but it is the main point where this is where everything is happening, and how is it going to be resolved? This is going to be the suspect somehow slipped a knife through, and they've now got one of the, you know, other characters with a knife to their throat saying, you're gonna die because you found out I did this and I don't want anybody else doing it. That's gonna be like your climax point, where, you know, it's a matter of, this is gonna be the main confrontation that was going to occur. This is everything that happened. Like, I can't use Naruto as an example for this because we've had how many, you know, climax points so far? Let's think here. Okay, so, like, I'm just going to use the first part of Death Note as an example because I refuse to believe anything past L's death exists, because I'm a Light fan. So, okay, so the main climax that Death Note was building to was the confrontation between Light and L. And how was that going to play out? Was L going to be able to prove Light was Kira? Was Light going to kill L? You know, that's what the main point that they were striving to. And I point out also that the mangaka wanted the series to end after L's death, but no, they pushed him to continue it, which was like, ugh, because it killed my Light. Okay, all right, so, and that's another thing that occasionally people do have to bow down to is public pressure, but yeah, that's an entirely different thing. So that was essentially the main part that everybody was trying to get to, which was what was going to happen here. You'd spent so much time world building around these characters. You had, you know, the quirky L who, you know, was sugar addicted, and so you had all the little subplots with that trying to happen, with L trying to work with the police and everything like that, of Light trying to evade him, working with Ryuk, trying to deal with Misa. But ultimately, the main part of that plot line was still the Kira investigation and trying to build up to find out who was Kira and whether L would prevail or Light would. That was the main plot in there, and that was the main part of what was going to occur. So that climax didn't necessarily have to be life or death threatening, but you could pretty much tell from the beginning it was, and that was the main aspect of it. Like for a romantic comedy, the main climax would probably be the love confession, or how the guy finds out the girl likes him, or how the girl finds out the guy likes him, or, you know, whatever that thing was. Like, who here has seen My Best Friend's Wedding? I know it's a chick flick, but okay, so a few people have seen it. So in that one, the climax would probably be where the guy finds out she loves him because she kisses him, and then you hold on to that high climax point because she's having to chase him, and the climax is like the chasing of the girl chasing the other girl to say, you know what, you still win, and that's the confrontation right there between the two girls. And that's going to be your climax. That's going to be this is the fight over the guy. This is the final moment where everything comes into play. And so this is where you start to wrap up all your loose plot threads, everything like that. This is where all your red herrings, everything else come into effect. And then once you are there, it's essentially a point of learning how to effectively manage that climax. For instance, we've seen that climaxes can be fast. They're that one moment between Light and L when, you know, Light kills L. And then you have like the slightly more drawn out climax where, okay, the Big Bang happened here and we're still dealing with the Big Bang a little bit later because this is a DBZ fight and it takes 30 episodes to power up. The climax is the resolution. This is when everything happens. Any questions on that, or is climax pretty self-explanatory? Go ahead.
I have, like, can there be two climaxes, like an emotional climax and then like a physical climax? Like if I was doing a Renji and Rukia fanfiction, my ultimate goal is to have those two characters get romantically involved, right?
Okay.
So, like, if they reach that level in their relationships, then that would be their emotional climax. But if I'm writing a battle scene or something like that to get those two characters to that point, that would be like the action climax. So how would you put those two, like the emotion and like the action of the world, in concert together?
You would want to decide which was going to be your main plot line. Like if the battle was secondary to the romance, your main climax is going to be that I love you scene. That's what you would want to spend the most time on. And your battle climax is going to be something that you want very close to that I love you climax, just to keep interest up. And then you kind of can draw it out a little bit, like, you know, on the way there, you know, like Rukia is injured and so Renji is throwing a fit about there. You could have the I love you climax and then she punches him out and goes anyway because Rukia kicks butt. But so it's pretty much just, you want to space it evenly so that your main plot point is always centered. If you want the main focus to be romance, great. That's what you want to be your highest thing. And then like the battle climax can be just slightly lower on your resolution scale, which I'm going to get into in just a sec, or, you know, slightly lower on your rising action point. And it could be, because if the battle is what causes the romance climax, then your then that battle is going to have to be right before your ultimate climax, and you're just going to have to draw out the romantic climax just a little bit to give it more impact than the battle. So it's kind of gauging where you want things on this pyramid and how you want to go from there. And then you had a question?
Yes, I guess this is right after the climax. I mean, because when we're doing an epilogue, because I know one thing I noticed with a lot of Craig Thomas's writings, I mean, like with Firefox, I mean, it was much like the movie, you know, he has the last Firefox, the Firefox blows up, and he flies up, boom. It's the climax, and this story ends, and a lot of his other books are like that way too.
That was a great intro into the next section of Freytag's pyramid, or just how your plot needs to work. Immediately after the climax, you have the period that is essentially called resolution, which goes like this, literally. You go from a high point of action, your climax, to a resolution where they are essentially wrapping everything up. And I realize I've kind of like mixed things up, but I apologize. So this section right here is kind of your resolution. This is where you're beginning to tie up plot threads, where you are beginning to have essentially a cool down period before you end the story. So this is, say like the mini plot line we were working on where somebody finds a body. The climax of that is, you know, the suspect takes a knife to somebody's throat and says, you know, you found out who I am, I'm going to kill you, yada, yada, yada. So that confrontation is the climax. So your falling action or your resolution is going to be the police, everybody came out alive, a couple of people might have some bruises and some bumps and maybe a liter or two of lost blood, but they're ultimately alive. But, and you kind of like explain that in your resolution as it is falling down. It's, watching the suspect be carted off in handcuffs. It's slowly kind of tying down, and it is making everything it's giving your reader a break while explaining things. And it's pretty much just saying, okay, so everything is ending now. Here is here's the aftermath of the climax, pretty much. And you can still have plot points along this resolution, but you want very few. So, say, as they're carting the suspect away in handcuffs, the main character gets a call from his girlfriend who's like, you need to come here right now. Just come here right now. And so he's like, okay, the investigation is, sorted up. You guys have everything. I'll fill out whatever affidavits I need to tomorrow. Peace, love, spot. And so he runs to his girlfriend, and part of the falling resolution is, oh, when I told you earlier that you were a gigantic jerk and I hate you, never mind, I love you because you were on TV. And so that's pretty much, and that will help wrap up additional subplots that you may have had. Still give you a couple of bits of downwinding action as long as it's calming things down and as long as it's bringing to a smoother pace. And then your next part of Freytag's period is right here, which needs to be a lot shorter, which is also an extremely short period. And this is, I think it's like, yeah, pardon?
The denouement?
Yeah, thank you.
The French one.
Yeah, the denouement, which is basically your closure, which is this. the end. And that's it. And so this is, everything has been resolved. Here are my final words on it. You know, this is where everybody ends up in 15 years if you want to do a little insert like that. Peace, love, hugs, the world is over, bye. Okay. Now, you can add an epilogue. One sec for everybody with questions. Let me just finish this up really quick, and then I will be happy to jump in. The closure is the end. You can add an epilogue onto that. Like I said, like if you want to add in there, like this is where everybody is at in 15 years. I generally wouldn't do it though. It depends on if you're sure this is the final end, if you're not going to do a sequel, anything like that. Epilogues can be setups for next stories where it's like, you know, the villain's, you know, the suspect, all of a sudden you see somebody slip the suspect, you know, a shank and a key to their cell door. That could be like an epilogue or a little afterthought. My favorite version of that is what I thought was the hand of Ronnie in Doctor Who, if anybody watches Doctor Who, where you had the girl's hand pull the Master's ring out of the ashes. And I was like, oh, come on, please be the hand of Ronnie, but it wasn't. And it was some insane police chick, which I'm like, hello. But okay, so, but generally you only want to add those in there if you're planning to continue the storyline and if you're going somewhere, or if there's just something you really want to get in there. Like J.K. Rowling put in the Harry Potter epilogue because she didn't want people to think Harry and Luna got together, and I'm like, oh please. But generally it's not needed. Generally sometimes it's better to leave your audience with the option of where things are going to end up. Leave it an open future where their own imaginations can flourish and fill in details. It just depends on how tidy you want everything. Like if you spot a plot thread that you didn't tie up, or a plot hole that you included, you can include the information in your epilogue if you just want a fast way out, but I would generally recommend rewriting a part or two to, you know, fit that in there if that's still possible. If it's already published, you can't do that and you need the epilogue, but if you can still fit it in somewhere, I'd recommend that rather than an epilogue, just as a general rule. And then questions, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to put a comment. One of the things that I hate the most in stories is when people leave out loose ends, you know. And I know when you're planning a story and everything, you plan like, I'm going to put these points, these points, these points, these how I'm going to resolve. But I think one of the things happen in fanfiction is that people kind of lose track of when they just like unknowingly really just like put in more plot points and then they never get resolved in the end. You're just like, and so I think as you're writing it, if you see something that could have some sort of like significance later on or something, just make sure that you mark it down so you can close it up in the end. Because if not, people would be like, why was that even in there if there's no explanation to it later on? And it just kind of like leaves you wondering and makes you feel a little bit empty about certain parts of the story and the characters. And like, sometimes it leaves holes in the characters, in their character. Really wondering about when the plot is left,
Definitely, yeah. Pretty much which is kind of a little bit on what we went over. Any plot hole, any unclosed up thread, anything like that, it really does detract from your story. One of my personal beliefs is that the worst crime you can commit is start posting something without having it plotted out. If you have it plotted out, you are good. If you are just posting it to post it, you are screwed. Right. Because you are going to lose track of everything. You're going to have those moments that disappoint your fans, disappoint the people who are reading it, and it's going to be annoying. Like, I don't have a lot of room to talk because I have my entire story plotted out, but I've just haven't had the time to finish writing it. So I stopped posting on a couple of mine a little while ago because I just haven't had the time to write it. But at the exact same time, I have everything, and all the threads that are out there are still pretty tidy, and that's what you want, is even if you have to stop posting, people can generally see the way your story was going to go, so they don't have those questions. Go ahead.
I know that's a big that's the problem with my fanfic. I got the whole main story in my mind right here, and I could probably even write out a rough outline. Problem is, one, find the adequate time to read it, and two, finding ways to connect the high points. I mean,
yeah, that's something that is individual to each particular story, and to a certain degree, it's what the author can handle. Like, I know some authors that will include, like, not just like 1 or 2 main plot arcs, but who will include like 6 or 7. And how they keep track of all of this, I have no clue, and I have my undying envy because I will never be able to manage that. So it's a matter of what you think you can handle, what you think you can manage, what you can manage. Like if you're losing track of things in your own head, the second you do not know where every single one of your characters is or where every single one of your plots is, or your flow chart lost it, anything like that, that's when you say, okay, I need to cut something out. And that's when you like wrap up a plot thread fast to get it over with. You cut it out from the story completely if you haven't published, anything like that. And how you tie all of those points together is essentially kind of up to you and up to your plot line. Like a way to tie a story together in one situation won't work in another.
Because I mean, I really don't want to do this because I'm trying to think of a bunch of little mini stories, or essentially it's a war fic. I'm not sure how to think about these different battles because I know I was tempted saying, well, 5 weeks later, this is the way why the program's progressing.
Yeah,
I don't want to do that, but I'm not sure. It's just kind of
what you would want to do.
I want to ask for ideas.
No, I mean that's okay. So like, if it's a war fic, have you read Tanya Huff's Valor series? I would recommend that if you haven't. She does a very good job of going over time periods with characters, and it's also a really good example of using the characters in the platoon to create subplots without having to create new subplots. There's like the character who's the hacker, and it's like every now and then there's a comment on him almost getting caught. That's a subplot to it. Things like that. So it's still keeping the main plot of them still trying to complete the mission, but the subplots are automatically included. If you're trying to do massive time jumps, one of the things I would recommend was maybe having different missions, or even just doing a straight up, sometimes for things you can't do that time jump, it's just how well you handle it. And you want to come in there with a brief overview. So the last, it had been 5 weeks at headquarters as they waited for, the probe to reach there. There had been, massive meetings with the brass, things like that, as people tried to essentially figure out what was going on without all of the information, and most likely how that fails, because if anybody knows anything, it's if you don't have all the information, you make bad decisions, and it is pathetic. Okay, so what I wanted to do, since we just kind of got our warning, is go over, does anybody have a specific plot that they want input on, a fic that they're working on right now that could get group input, anything like that? Like you mentioned you're working on a Renji Rukia fic. Is anybody working on another one that... Go ahead.
Fanfic. It's an original story.
Okay.
Good.
I have a hard time with the entrance into it.
Okay.
Because it's a story to make fun of both magical girl things and superhero comics.
Okay, so is it coming at it from like a geek aspect where it's geeks literally getting together and making fun of it, or is it a complete parody?
It's a complete parody. It's like called Confessions of the Dispensable Minion.
Oh, have you read the Evil Overlord list? If you have not looked that up online, that's a good rule for minions. Like if I'm an evil overlord, my minions will wear clear face plates. Just things like that. So I'd recommend reading that for your fic, because that would be extremely helpful on maybe having a smart minion critiquing all the other minions. But for that one, for an introduction for that one, it would probably be, you might want to have like just to continue parodying the magical girl thing. You could have, so my name is blank, and I hold the illustrious position of minion B in subplot A of this particular plot to kill villain D, or to kill hero D for the evil overlord blank. And then this is currently my day so far. We've had this blow up, this person forget this person this person get vaporized after asking for compensation for this. And so essentially it's par for the course. Oh, and by the way, the hero's fist is heading for my face. And so that's how you kind of enter it in there, and you set up the plot, because immediately you get that type of campy parody attitude just from their inner monologue. And then you want to like maybe include the monologue at the beginning of each chapter just to kind of tie it all together, and then just it kind of contain one blow up after another, and it will be extremely entertaining.
But actually have the beginning of the entire series mapped out because I also like want to include like kind of a high school romance thing going on in there too.
Okay.
Because I'm gonna have that my main minion is really in love with the main sidekick.
Okay.
And it's like about how the sidekicks and minions just get completely ignored. But anyway, but I want, like, I have how it's like she's introducing the high school thing because like she's just transferred to this incredibly preppy high school that's sponsored by the orphanage she lives in, and she looks down and there's cheerleaders on this side and preps on that side, and she looks at herself, she's a goth.
Okay.
That sort of thing, but I don't know how to introduce the fact that she's a villain because I had one idea, but I think that like jumps right up into a mini subplot climax.
Okay.
But I don't want to.
So maybe one of the things I would have her do is like she sits down in her first period and she's just like sitting there, and maybe it's a literature class that she likes if she's one of the, I hate to say it, but emo type of goth type of girls. And they're like all about dark poetry and everything like that. So she's excited because like, you know, the teacher has, you know, Poe posters on the wall, things like that. And she's in there and she goes, I'm going to enjoy this class. 2 minutes into class, she gets a text, her phone vibrates in her pocket, she pulls it out, and like you can even have on there, text says, text from evil overlord, where are you? And then you kind of do it in there, and so you finally have to have her leave by lunchtime on her first day to show up at the evil overlord's office and say, what? And all of a sudden the evil lord, where's my death ray? And then you go from there. And that's a good way to get it into there while still building up the high school plot line. Yeah, or the car keys. I like that one. Okay, one more really quick.
By the way, do you get a little more, speaking of magical, does you have any more leeway when you're writing parody? Because if I ever do get to do like my pet peeves deal, I want to start off a round robin bad fanfic, and I'm going to start off by writing a prologue with introduce the Mary Sue. She's Sailor Cerez, and she used to have her status when Cerez was an asteroid, and she lost her status, and then she gained it when when Pluto got demoted.
In that, I would really just like say,
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks everybody for coming. There's another fanfic panel next on crossovers and AUs. I hope you enjoy that one too if you want to stay. If not, have a great rest of the con. Go to closing ceremonies in the feedback panel. But so for that one, I would probably actually do something like do an introduction on it, like. So I am the on-again, off-again sailor, and why I say this is because I have lost my powers a grand total of 5 times. Yeah. And the reasons why are too numerous and stupid to count. And I just got my powers back, so I get to go on an adventure now. Right. Is pretty much just what I would do. You do have a lot of leeway with parody, and it's just a matter of how you use it and how you build your world with that. Yeah,
but again, it's supposed to be crap. So, I mean, it's going to be
it's not. A good parody can't be crap, or you're going to lose your audience. A good parody still has to be smart and still has to be well plotted out. It just has to be sarcastic.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. All right, but yeah. So.
All right.
Coolness.
We'll see how well.